Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we are so excited to share with you our master's project, which is called Pet Me, Sharing Digital Pets, Building Real Collaboration Skills. Thank you. I'm Wendy Shao.
And I'm Alice Yu.
And to get started this morning, we'd like you to think back to a time when you were frustrated or had a disagreement with someone because you could not figure out how to work together. Did this happen recently? How did this interaction make you feel? Did you walk away with the conflict resolved? Given today's polarized political climate, these misunderstandings are occurring even more frequently, causing individuals to not even want to try to work together. The ability to communicate clearly, listen well, and negotiate conflict constructively are all part of this complex, challenging task of collaborating with others, which is difficult to learn, but all the more necessary today. Given the complexity of this problem space and the scope, we decided to hone in on three individual areas. The first is the low prioritization of social emotional learning in schools. The second is the importance of practicing collaboration. And the third is the negative perception of tablets on children's social interaction. So we'll first start with this low prioritization of SEL. According to the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, or CASEL, this is the definition that they use for social emotional learning. However, we are specifically focusing on these last two elements, the establishing and maintaining positive relationships and making responsible decisions for our particular project. So in 2013, CASEL commissioned a survey of 605 teachers from across the country and found that 93% of teachers believe that teaching social emotional learning was very or fairly important in schools today. Secondly, in 2011, they also conducted a meta-analysis of 213 studies and found, and these studies included more than 270,000 students, and they found that for students who participated in evidence-based SEL programs, they achieved an 11 percentile point academic gain in comparison to students who did not participate in such programs. But despite these stark numbers demonstrating the importance of SEL, school reforms have not focused sufficiently on the socio-emotional factors that are crucial to learning. Unfortunately, the lack of urgency in implementing SEL into schools today threatens the future success of children everywhere. And even though it is a proven strategy that is endorsed by teachers across the country, too few schools and even fewer school districts are adopting SEL approaches.
So now that Wendy has brought into light how there is a low prioritization of social emotional learning, I will now talk about why it's important for children to practice collaboration skills. So as you can see from this quote here, most children today are at ease with technology because it has been continually present in their lives and they have been growing up with it. And while children are more skilled than infants or toddlers at maintaining interaction and creating shared understandings, their skills are still fragile and are often tied to specific familiar contexts. For example, they're unable to represent their views, resolve conflict, and they refrain from attempting to dominate the problem-solving process. So, due to the relevance and significance of this issue, we decided to focus on young children who are at a crucial stage of development and are now starting to understand and grapple with the ideas of collaborating with others. So the challenge for us was, how might we foster collaboration skills for 6 to 8-year-olds? After identifying the problem space, we decided to use the user-centered design model, starting with the research on collaboration. So building on constructivism, social constructivism refers to the notion that social participation is one of the main activities through which children learn. More specifically, children construct knowledge based on their social engagement and interaction with others, and they're able to this is mostly done by putting students into groups and creating scenarios where they need to interact with one another in order to solve a problem. Which leads nicely to the next study, which states that proximity is an integral aspect of collaboration because it allows for a peripheral awareness of other participants and their actions. In fact, according to Vygotsky, children guide each other through dialogue and often assume complementary problem-solving roles when it is based on an interest or activity that those two share together. And since children bring in a unique form of expertise and experiences, they alternate the role of a more capable peer when they engage in a collaborative activity. So based on these findings, we began to brainstorm ways of how we can foster collaboration among young children using technology.
And lastly, we focused and challenged this negative perception of tablets on social interactions. So nowadays we see children everywhere who are totally immersed in their screens, unaware of their surroundings, and just totally immersed in that virtual world. And so this kind of prompted our thinking of how are these technologies actually affecting children's social and emotional development, specifically with regards to them interacting with others. However, when we delved into the literature, we actually found that tablets have this amazing capacity to be collaborative, but are being used in these contexts that promote this independent use. For example, many parents actually use them as a babysitting tool and expect children to play independently and especially quietly when they are handed an iPad. However, researchers like Laura Ciela actually identified that one of the main affordances of tablets, especially in comparison to mobile devices or even computers, is the portability and ease of use that can support the collaboration. Additionally, iPads, more specifically, have a wide-angle viewing display of 178 degrees, and this allows children who are sharing an iPad to view the same screen and share the content. Lastly, in a study that was conducted by Lynn, he found and validated that in classrooms, tablets actually improve students' abilities to work with one another.
So, as we began to iterate on our game, we were mostly inspired by Osmo, as it perfectly bridges the digital and physical and encourages children to interact outside of the 10-inch screen. And this expansion of the play space really encourages children to communicate with one another, which really is different from the normal tablet experience of the user completely zoning in the game and losing sight of the outside world. So building on this idea, we present our solution, PetMe. PetMe is a two-player tablet game that aims to foster collaboration skills among young children by allowing them to take care of a shared pet. They initially have a chance to choose an avatar to represent themselves in the game, which also facilitates turn-taking. They then have a chance to name the pet together, which encourages them to form an attachment to the pet and also introduces the first scenario where communication and at times negotiation is necessary. The game then presents a problem, as it says, "Oh no, our pet looks sad. Talk with your partner to figure out what's wrong." This sets the stage for collaboration as the two children need to work together to solve their shared pet's needs. The game then directly gives specific tasks to each child to help them take turns and to make sure that one person doesn't take over the activity. And with the help of the tangible clue cards, as you can see on the top, they're able to navigate their different perspectives, and this back and forth cycle established between the two players, where the reaction of one player is in response to the other, encourages communication throughout the game. And the icons that you see on the bottom represent all the different interactions that the players can engage in. And throughout the game, the overall language choice model and encourage collaboration, as you can see from directions such as problem solve together, as well as agreed upon activity.
And so now that you've had a chance to experience and see the final prototype of PetMe, we're now going to walk through our design rationale that was informed by our user testing, and especially the major lessons or takeaways that we learned through this iterative process. So as Alice mentioned previously, physical proximity is integral to collaboration, and so this actually really helped us move from having 2 iPads to only 1. So our initial intentional choice of having 2 iPads was to allow one child to receive a clue or a key piece of information, and the other child did not receive such information unless if they verbally communicated with one another. However, this type of gameplay actually resulted in little to no communication and collaboration between the 2 players. However, when we moved to one screen, since they were sharing one single screen, this viewing allowed for children to actually engage with one another and interact with one another, and they had to coordinate their hand motions to avoid collisions, as well as just share that much closer space. Lastly, the move to one iPad actually changed our seating arrangement, and this helped facilitate greater interactions between the two children. When they were sitting across from each other, there was little communication. However, when they were sitting side by side, they were much more engaged with one another. In terms of interactivity, with each iteration of PetMe, we increased in our ability to show the interactivity of the pet. For our initial paper prototypes and PowerPoint prototype, there was little to show children that there was feedback after each interaction, and after, they were unable to see that the pet was getting better. It was always a stagnant image of a sad pet, even though they were constantly doing and meeting the pet's needs. So we progressed from these stagnant images to animated, emotive interactions. And in terms of personalization, we realized that children really needed to be invested in the game and feel like they were part of the game. And so we introduced the concept of avatars, which are recognizable emojis to help bridge that familiar environment so that children feel more comfortable and involved in the problem-solving process. Additionally, we also realized the importance of allowing children to co-name the pet early on, which also allowed them to communicate and negotiate with their partner.
So we also iterated multiple times to encourage communication, especially between two children who may have never seen each other before. So as you can see from the screen, there's a lot of text and a lot of different options, which inevitably led to children pressing on the different icons instead of following the directions. So by separating the different options from the directions, we noticed an increase in communication as children would initially focus on the clue and then communicate with one another before pressing on an icon. The icons were purposely visual without an explicit label because we wanted the children to identify what each icon represents. And that gave them an opportunity to really communicate with one another to figure out what the different options really were. Furthermore, having a tangible clue helped children communicate with each other more, and it sort of gave them an opportunity to navigate the gameplay away from the screen. And this integrating the tangible with the physical also allowed children to it helped children take their attention away from the screen at times as they would interact with their partner in a physical space. Another intentional design choice that we made was the speech bubble icon. As you can see from a previous iteration, the prompt says, "Listen to your partner," which often stifles collaborative communication and encourages children to take on a more passive role. So we decided to change into this icon because we really wanted children to actively discuss their ideas with one another. So because providing immediate feedback is an integral aspect of any successful game, we designed an error screen to guide children's gameplay. And in fact, we observed multiple instances of children engaging in a process of elimination as they would discard the options that led to this error screen. In addition to feedback, we noticed that the children would come back to the same sad pet, which could be discouraging and often disrupt the game flow since there was no visible progress. So now we present a more curated and specific feedback based on the previous interaction to help children further engage with the game, as well as empathize with the pet's needs.
So lastly, we conducted learner studies to collect data and evidence of children collaborating and communicating with one another. So we collected qualitative data from the children's dialogues and interactions when they were engaging with PetMe, and these centered around 3 different themes. The first is collaboration, and then logic or reasoning, and then lastly the enthusiasm with continuing to engage with PetMe. So for instance, we witnessed one partner who reread the text that says, "After you and your partner agree on an action, to show that and reiterate the fact that they needed to first agree before they could proceed in the gameplay. Similarly, we also saw multiple instances of children using process of elimination, thinking back to which interactions they'd already completed and which ones they had not, to help aid in their problem solving when they were stuck. And lastly, we were really excited to see children excited to play the game and continue to play the game. And one child even asked us after she finished, when will it come out in the App Store? So that was really validating for us. And we also asked parents to complete a survey prior to their child engaging with PetMe. And these questions or statements are based on DESA, which is the gold standard for social emotional learning assessment. And so parents had to rate the frequency that they believed their child to be correct. And so, for example, it says, my child responds to another child's feelings, my child is able to resolve a disagreement, my child respects another child's opinion when deciding what to do. So these were all about working with others and trying to understand more fully how their child works with others. And these also highlighted the need for children to constantly practice working with others. However, these served as more of a pretest, and we have an ask of all of you. We struggled to come up with a quantitative metrics to show that PetMe really directly supports children's collaboration skills and communication skills. And so any suggestions or feedback that you may have of how we could quantitatively measure these improvements would be phenomenal.
So lastly, we would like to thank all the people, the following people, for all the help and guidance. And PetMe would not be the same project that it is today without you guys. And we would also like to thank everyone in the room for taking your time to listen to our presentation. And we will now open up the floor for any questions.
And exhale.
I
Bridget?
have lots of questions, but I really love your framing of the problem, and I think it is, very essential, very well grounded in the literature that we need to support children in collaborating, and also the need to help shift parents' view from thinking about tablets as something that should just be babysitting, child alone, keeps them quiet, to something that generates interaction, collaboration, cooperation. And I'm curious if you had a chance to engage parents in the conversation about those topics as you did your user studies. And I see that you collected some data from them, which is awesome, but did you also have a chance to informally discuss?
We talked
what
to
you see?
a couple, mostly to understand what type of games they actually do, their children do play on their on their iPads, less of the notion that they're used independently. That would be really interesting to talk with more parents to understand their perspectives.
I think one thing we asked one of the parents was whether they ever saw their children playing on an iPad together, and that wasn't something that they were familiar with. So I think that gave them a unique sort of perspective in terms of, this is a game where your children can actually play together on one iPad. So it's quite effective and fun at both times.
And did you notice any relationship between the parent rating of their child's social skill and what happened on the iPad? I mean, I know that would be sort of you need a big enough and some variation to look at that, but I'm just curious if you had any parents who's, my child never responds to another child's feelings, and this is a major problem, and then how did they do?
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting initially when we were coming up with these questions. Some of our feedback from our peers was actually, well, are parents going to actually give an accurate representation of their child? These are very strengths type of questions, and will they be like, yeah, of course, my child could do all of these things, and in actuality not. But we found that they were pretty representative of their child. We also only really interacted with the children for a short period of time. At most, it would be 30 minutes. So it's not like we really understood their child fully as well. But we're pleased to see that parents tried to answer as honestly as possible.
And I think it really depends on the context, because these questions don't specifically ask them, do they respond to their child's field? Like, where is this happening? Is it in the home? Is it in the school? Whereas this tablet game was just sort of an open play space where they just met this child or it could be their friend. So I can't say that it would directly translate into that experience, but it would be interesting to see if there are any patterns between those two.
So you didn't have any children grabbing the iPad from the other child, or even stark examples of?
It could also be the fact that we were
Yeah,
part
you
of
were
the
there and
experience, so it may not be as representative of what it would be like if adults were not in the room.
Right.
But no, we did not, luckily did not have to mediate any such disagreements like that.
And were they siblings who did it together, or friends, and were they the same age, or? I'm curious to know, like, the couples of kids that you tested, like, what were their configurations?
Yeah, we
Know
had
each other.
a large variety. Initially, we were trying to target children who did not know each other, and that was difficult scheduling-wise. We were able to do that mainly at the Creativity Museum, but they were also much younger than what our target age actually is. We did test on siblings, and we also tested on children who were friends with each other.
Okay.
And an interesting thing is when we tested with siblings, because they were already familiar with one another,
Yeah.
they were a lot more comfortable sort of moving on with the game as like, so if there was some sort of disagreement with the name, then they would just be more easily like wanting to solve the conflict, because they just want to play the game and they don't want to like fight with their sister or their brother, and it's something that you just want to get through. Whereas when it was two children that have never seen with each other, they still had some sort of desire to name the pet that they wanted to do. So that seemed to give us a more accurate representation of what it would really be like for our game to work in terms of encouraging collaboration.
But it is realistic that siblings would play together, or that friends would play together too. So just, right, because it's just in the test situation, there's all this other stuff about I don't know you, and like, so I think it was really good that you got siblings and friends to do it.
So I'm really curious about your switch from 2 tablets to 1 tablet, because I got a chance to work with you early on in the prototyping stage and remember the feedback that you got. But it also seems like you switched your testing demographic from people who were a little younger, who didn't know each other. Did your entire kind of data set or user testing set come more the next time from people who knew each other and were siblings or were friends, or did you have a chance to do more testing at the Creativity Museum with your one iPad setup?
We did not test at the Creativity Museum. However, we still had children who did not know each other, or children who were siblings, and also children who were friends. We were able to test all 3 of those with the single iPad.
So one thing in particular I was curious about, I remember talking to you guys about a little bit of alpha kid thing where you have 2 people sitting across from each other and one person controls the action. And I'm curious if that changed for better or for worse when you're looking at the same iPad.
I think children were pretty good about turn taking actually when there was only one iPad. They really alternated who got to actually choose and press the icon after they had decided what they were going to do.
And I think just like having like that symbolic representation of one